Shoot a shot. I'm coming in. Coming in. Shoot that. Hey, why not? Hey.
All right, well, we are here, episode 1, Flame Keepers Podcast. Super excited with my buddy Royce Walker in the house. We are both going to be hosting this thing and kicking this thing off together. It's been a long time coming. Just a little bit on the front end, Flame Keepers Podcast is dedicated to stir up, provoke, move around topics, and really speak into major things that are going on in the church today. So myself, Chris Custer, one of the hosts here, and then Royce Walker is the other host. Royce, you want to tell them a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into episode 1.
Sure, man. So Royce Walker, I'm 37. Currently, I've been pastoring at various different levels in local churches for right at a decade. Worked with youth and kids to my current role, family ministries and discipleship. And so me and my wife live in Kansas currently. I'm from Texas. So we've been married for 15 years this summer. And I got 2 little girls, almost a 17-year-old and almost 11-year-old. And so that's kind of my side of life and a little bit of my background. But I'll kick it back to you, Chris. What you guys got going on?
All right. So same over here. We're both family guys.
Yep.
Been married going on 15 years this year. And if I just got that wrong, she is going to post something about that. Yeah, 15 years this May.
Yeah, it's
coming up. 3 kids, Asher, Ava, Arya. So 13, 9, and 6. And so boy, girl, girl. Entered the teenage years, which is super fun and exciting. Hashtag drama. And just loving it. I have just over the last, 16, 17 years with the Lord, essentially just been steadfast after his heart and running as hard as I possibly can after him. Funny story, Royce and I know each other both BC, before Christ.
Oh, yeah.
Grew up together, first jobs together, met at a grocery store called Tum Thum. So episode 1
we worked at, to be clear, we weren't just hanging out at the grocery store. We both worked there.
Yes, we both worked there. But episode 1, we're going to dive into the fun stories and let you guys get to know us a little bit, and then go into what we're doing and why we're doing this. So,
For sure.
Yeah.
Dive in if you want me to, bro.
Go ahead. Whatever you got on your heart, we'll just kind of go from there, and we can bounce around and make it fun.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun story. And so, we kind of wanted to, obviously, like Chris said, introduce ourselves, but our lives intertwine in a very interesting way. And so as we kind of tell the story, it tails off and becomes one big story, as it does with all of God's family. So, grew up North Texas kid and came from, really broken situation, broken home. I spent first 4 years in a women's shelter. There's some interesting bits about my kind of birth story that we may get into at a later time. But grew up without my dad, had a stepdad, but he was pretty absentee most of the time. Didn't have any kind of relationship with God. My mom had a real bad experience with like Southern Baptists in the 60s, and so that was not a thing. But I did have a religion. It was Texas football, and I was a very devout follower of Texas football. But
it's
really,
kind of cool if you live in Texas.
It is, yeah. You can either play football or you're a special kid and you play soccer. But Chris will talk more about that.
Yeah, I ended up on the other side of the spectrum.
He did. But which is all good. I love soccer too. It's great. It's a better sport, I think. But anyway, whenever it comes to just kind of growing up, was a really insecure kid, extremely anxious, middle schooler. But I got some notoriety and size by the time I was in high school, and so a lot of that went away. Started partying really, really hard. Had a friend who was 2 grades rather, older than me. And he was a stud football player. And so he got invited to a lot of things and took me over to a lot of things. And so it looked like a lot of really wild parties from the time I was about 11 or 12 onward. And had some very loose parents. And so that turned into a lot of crazy stuff throughout my teenage years. Went through high school, similar like that. Had a really toxic relationship throughout high school with a gal. And then met my now wife, and she was at my high school. Yeah, she was at my high school. We had, she was the student aide in my math class. The way I tell this story is that she was a student aide and I needed a good grade. And she was grading the papers, and so I started dating the student aide. She would tell that story very differently, but we were not charmed by one another. We were friends, quick friends, but we have a very odd story in the sense that we didn't really like each other a whole lot. But lo and behold, we were, in high school, and we were convenient, and we were both coming off of some rocky relationships. And so one of those things kind of led to another, and there was just something, some sparks that happened. She wound up actually moving to the Missouri side of the Kansas City metro right after we graduated high school. And around that time, Chris and I had been working together for a few years. We had started partying together a lot. And we got roped into a company that we were both very successful with. Yeah, roped in. But, we were both very successful in it. And, I credit a lot of good things for coming out of that season, although it ultimately wasn't the most beneficial thing. It taught us a lot of lessons. And we went from one level of relationship to a different level of relationship. Wound up moving to California together for a short period of time, one December. And there's some fun stories that came out of that. But then we both, it's kind of different times to tell his part, but departed from that adventure. And I actually departed because Jenny, who was my girlfriend at the time, got pregnant. And, growing up, it was a really big deal.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was a really big deal for me to be a dad. And I was, out of town a lot, working, and I didn't want to be an absentee dad whenever it came to the life of my daughter and just provide monetarily. It was not the vibe I was going for. And so quit that job. And we actually moved to Joplin, Missouri. She had some family. Both of our families' homes got foreclosed. This is in the beginnings of the recession. But 2007, moved to Joplin, Missouri, and had my oldest daughter out there, and at a hospital that would later be torn down by a tornado, of all things, oddly enough. But anyway, stayed there for a year and completely lost touch with everyone. Honestly, I just kind of dove into
you disappeared.
I was wiped off the face of the map for just about everyone previous, because I was just focused on this new thing, this new adventure called fatherhood, and trying to do that. And but anyway, a little less than a year after we moved back to North Texas, super broke, we didn't have any money, and made the move back to North Texas.
This is you, Jenny, and Chloe.
And Chloe,
I'll move back. Yeah.
Yep.
Just clarifying for the people.
Yeah, no, that's important, because the next part is we were there for just a few months, and in June of would have been 2008, Jenny picked up and peaced out, and didn't tell me. She dropped me off at work one day. We were sharing a car, and I wasn't someone you could just confront with like, "Hey, I'm leaving," like that. I don't know how it would have went, but it definitely would have been difficult, and she wasn't about to do that, so she just packed a key in my backpack and then deuced out. And anyway, not to get all the way into kind of my testimony there, but that became a very important day. And the next day, I called Chris and hadn't talked to him in a year. And I just said, "Hey, man, I need you to come live with me." And
all right, pause there.
Yeah, that's probably the place to stop.
Yeah, pause there, because I'll kind of fill in my side, and then this is like the reconnection point that gets super fun, especially when God gets involved. So, Chris, live over here in North Carolina currently, Hendersonville, Asheville area. my family and I moved up here going on 4 years ago from North Texas, so Dallas-Fort Worth area, and grew up in broken home, similar to Royce. Father left when I was 12-ish, 13, and had a younger brother, so it was just us two with mom, and grew up with mom who, everything fell apart, with life when my father left, and really challenging years through the teenage years. I mean, stayed pretty steadfast with soccer. Sports kept me focused for the most part, stayed out of trouble. But then after graduating high school, soccer went away, started hanging out with Royce, bad influence. And no,
Really bad.
not really. Not really. We were just bad influences to each other. But
That's right. Yeah.
went down the drinking path and girls and partying and just really getting mixed up with the wrong crowds, wrong people. Royce and I did meet when we were 14 or 15 at Tum Thum, pushing grocery carts, and our friendship did start there, which is super fun. A lot of fun stories.
One day I'll tell the story about how I stole your truck.
Yes. Yeah. That was heartbreaking story. But yeah, I definitely want to hit that at a later time.
One day.
Now I'm sidetracked because that truck was sweet. It was like the sweetest truck in the world.
I know, I bought it.
For like a 16-year-old kid in high school. But so fast forward to, my years, we go to California, Royce and I, for this company 2020, and we're selling door to door, loving it. I mean, we are learning all sorts of sales tactics and communication and how to talk to people and the psychology of it, understanding people. I mean, it's intense, and we're doing really well with the company. And come back, and Royce disappears. I still kind of keep going about my way. And then when I come back from California, I have to move in with my grandmother because I'd lost my apartment. I was about to lose my truck, not the truck Royce stole from me, a different truck. I got kicked out of my mom's house because my mom and I just could not get along. I was, 19-year-old, thought I knew everything, 20-year-old, thought I knew everything, and just, and she was still in a rough spot, just, in life as well. Ever since my father left, it really put a toll on her. And so we, parted ways, moved in with grandma. Well, grandma, Nanny, is the praying grandmother, which hopefully every family in the world has one of these, but prayed me into coming to know the Lord. And living in our home, this guy is traveling. His name's David. He's an evangelist. He usually would stay with her, and he is coming over for dinner. And I'm super uncomfortable, honestly. He's at dinner table, and he is like filled with the Holy Spirit, which I had no concept of the Holy Spirit at the time. Didn't even know the language. I knew Jesus growing up. You kind of, everyone in, Texas, it's a, Mecca for churches.
It's a nominal thing. It was very nominal.
Yeah. And so, but this guy, I mean, looking back, I mean, he's just glowing with the Holy Spirit and making me super uncomfortable at dinner. However, God had a touch for me that night, and he's sitting at the dinner table and he says, "Wedding bells. I hear wedding bells coming your way." And I'm like, what is this guy talking about? And at the time I was dating a girl, and I was like, I could marry her. I liked her. It wasn't my wife, Tori, at the time. It was a different girl. And I was like, I guess I could marry her. And that's not, clearly that wasn't what the Lord was referring to. But within 15 minutes, I'm done with my plate. I'm hightailing it out of there, and I am attempting to get to my room because I'm staying there now temporarily with my grandma, 20-year-old man living at grandma's. That's the greatest setup ever. Not, right? And Yeah, grandma's boy. So I'm going into my bedroom. I wash my plate, and I just have this feeling this guy wants to pray for me. I book it to the bedroom, and right when my hand hits that doorknob, his name's David. David goes, "Hey, Chris." I'm like, this is it. This is it. Can I pray for you? I'm like, hear me. Up until this point, the only people who've ever prayed for me in my entire life is my grandma, maybe my mom and my dad. That was it.
Yeah.
And that was like nighttime, like tuck you in and pray, occasionally. Never really grew up with anyone laying hands on me and praying for me. So this was like completely uncomfortable. This guy puts his hand on my chest. He asked if he could. He puts his hand. I said, sure. I didn't know what to expect. The moment he puts his hand on my chest, I am melted under the power and the fire of God. Like I am just like weeping already. He hasn't even said anything. Then he starts talking, and he starts telling me things that are just deep into my heart that I haven't shared with anyone, not even my grandma. And I'm just getting wrecked over and over. And next thing I know, I'm just on my grandma's living room floor, just burning up. No one can put a hand on me because I'm like 100 degrees plus, 1,000 degrees. And next thing I know, it's already been like an hour and a half. And I get up and I'm like, I'm supposed to share what just happened to me. That's all I can explain. I'm supposed to preach. I'm supposed to share this message of Jesus. I just encountered the living God. That's all I could articulate at the time. So a couple months go by, and I promise the intersection's happening.
No, yeah. I know where it is. No, they don't know.
Yep. So a couple months go by, and I'm just like, cannot get out of the Word. I'm just reading everything from beginning to end. I was actually recommended to start in the book of Acts, which that's not normal. Usually it's John for some reason. But I'm just like amazed because I'm like, this just happened to me. This just happened to me. I didn't know about tongues. Started praying in tongues without any rehearsal. Nobody taught me this stuff. It just happened. Prophesying, when the disciples of John were filled with the Holy Spirit in the book of Acts, and they just started prophesying. That just started happening. All these things just start happening, and I don't have a basis for it. So then when I'm reading the book of Acts, I'm like, well, it says it here, so this makes sense. Okay, this makes sense. Not knowing a lick of different theologies or doctrines or different belief structures. And so I'm just going with what I'm experiencing, and then I'm reading it, and then it's just like lining up. Fast forward, and I'm probably 5 months into this wild ride with the Lord, which is a lot to cover there. However, we won't go too deep into that. I go to a job interview because I'm like, I want to work in a ministry. I want to work. I got to be somewhere that's just like Christ focused, where I can read the Word, I can pray with others, I can, just talk about the things of the Lord. And I start looking online, and I come across this group called Bluefish TV, which is also known as Right Now Media. And I put in an application immediately because they're hiring a sales associate. I'm like, I can do sales, and I love Jesus. This is great. This is like made for me. I lived in a city called Arlington at the time. This job was over in Richardson. If you know anything about that distance, it's very far.
With DFW traffic. If you look at it on the map, it's not going to seem that crazy, but you just get on any highway in North Texas around.
It's like a 50-minute drive. And then when you add traffic, you can move into an hour and a half one way, easy. And I was already broke, so I go to the job interview knowing that I'm probably not going to be able to take it, unfortunately. And I don't have the means to like go move out and get my own apartment, put, first month rent down, all that stuff. So I get out of the job interview. very disappointed because they essentially offered me the role at the end of the interview. I'm driving home, and this is where the intersection happens.
Yeah.
I get a phone call from Royce. This is
Now,
the phone
hold
call.
on.
Yeah.
Because I want to pause this because I don't want people to miss this part, okay?
Yep.
We had not spoken. We were very, very close from the time we were 14. We're both 19, 20 at this point in time.
It's been years since we talked.
It had been more than a year since we had said a word to one another. The only thing I knew was that Chris was living with his grandma, and therefore I deduced, well, it doesn't have a whole lot going on. And
I didn't know you knew that.
Yeah, I remembered. I don't know how I knew it, but I did know that. But anyway, but we hadn't talked in over a year. I had heard through the grapevine, probably, I don't know, Steve-O or Kev or someone like that. But anyway, I'd heard through the grapevine he still was chilling with his grandma, and then I'm like, I don't need rent. I don't need anything. I just need. I had 24 hours earlier. Okay, I had myself, my girlfriend, and my kid, and now I just have myself. And I'm a horrible person to live with at the time, so I don't want to live with myself. And so I call Chris, and he's literally driving home back to Arlington.
Driving out of the interview. Yeah. I'm
away from Plano.
Yep.
And
Richardson,
I call him.
Plano. Yep.
And I just said, hey, I need you to come live with me. Now, this was the super funny thing. Because
and it was just like to the point. You didn't even tell me.
No, I didn't tell you any of the circumstance. Because that's just how we were, though. I mean, if I was like, hey, Chris, come to California with me. You're like, okay. Hey, Chris, I need you to come live with me. Okay. You know, it's like we didn't have to chop it up. We didn't have to catch up. It wasn't, hey, how's the weather and how's the fam? No, we just straight in.
Yeah. So I remember responding to you right after you said, hey, I need you to come live with me. And I was like, hey, I'm a little different than I was before. I don't know how to explain this, but.
Well, hold on. Because when you said that, I remember you saying that. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, I grew up around gay people my whole life. You're fine, dude. It's cool. It was like, I was like, it's fine, dude. I don't care. Because I thought that's where you were going with it. But anyway, I knew that wasn't going to be a thing. I was like, is he in a fad moment? But then you hit me with what you told me.
Yeah. So I was like, I got saved and I'm on fire for Jesus. And you were like, I don't care. I just need a friend.
My exact quote, because I tell this story, not exactly super often, but somewhat often. I literally told you, you said, I gave my life to Jesus a year ago. And I said, or last year, I think was exactly how you said it. I said, I don't care if you gave your life to a caterpillar a year ago. I just need you to come live in my apartment.
Yeah, I just need a friend. That's what I remember is I just need a friend. I'm thinking, okay, well, hold on. I actually don't even want to go down this path unless I take this to my grandparents, because at that point in time they were discipling me. And so I was like, all right, Royce, just give me a couple days. I'm going to talk to my grandparents and pray with them and just really get their counsel. And if they bless it, I'll do it. If they don't bless it, sorry, bud. I don't know. This is new territory for me to re-engage, because I knew that we used to party and drink and, hang out and do stupid things together before Jesus. And so a couple of days go by and my grandparents are like, listen, you are new in this. However, you're so serious and steadfast after the Lord. We trust the Lord in you and on your life. And so we're going to send you, and we bless it. And they both totally got behind me going out and moving. I kind of jumped a very important part, though, which is just the wildest. I mean, it's just so wild. So on the way home, before we hang up on the first call, I said, well, and by the way, like, where are you living?
Right.
And he's like, this, and this address. Well, we didn't have like I don't think phones existed where you could just pop it in. So I had to go home, put it in MapQuest online, and it was like a minute and a half from the job interview I just came out of with Bluefish TV. Mind blown. My grandparents actually really saw that as like the Lord too. And so all together, all these pieces are starting to come together where it's a no-brainer. It's like, okay, Lord, we see you in it. So,
well, and there's a little bit more to that, because what I didn't, share, I mean, I didn't share with you at the time, and I didn't share throughout the whole like intro piece, was just that I had zero affiliation, I had never walked into a church in my life. I had heard about Jesus because that's what happens when you live in North Texas. Yeah. But you just associated this religion called Christianity with people who were just hypocritical and doing the exact same things that you were doing, because you were with them when they weren't at church on Sunday, and then they were at church on Sunday. So that was my only semblance for the whole thing. And therefore I never had, I was never an atheist. I was very agnostic, though, just in the sense of like, hey, I'm a very curious person. I don't believe I'm the highest thing in the order of the universe. And so, but I have no answers. I have no idea about any of the rest of the stuff, but no relationship with anything. And that day when Jenny left, my boss, I worked at the mall in Plano, Texas, and my boss let me borrow her car and go back to my apartment. Jenny had dropped the key in my backpack, and I just went in, and she had, in a matter of a couple of hours, maybe a few hours, she had removed everything, all the pictures that we had, all, it was just, I walked in and it was empty. Yeah. And it was the most, I could feel the emptiness of that place. Yeah. And later I would recognize that one of the things that the Lord was doing is he was showing me a reflection of my life. Like, I had built this worship around this baby and this idea of being a father or a dad, or however you want to say it. But it was empty. And that worship was idolatry, which is a horrible thing to do to a baby, but we can get into that in later episodes. But at the end of the day, I walk into that apartment. It's completely empty. I go upstairs. It's a townhome, so I go upstairs where my daughter's room was. There's nothing in the room. There's just a little purple stuffed animal on the ground, and everything else is gone. And I remember I was a very emotionless type of a person. I was a very cold person growing up, because I just gone through some gnarly stuff. And so I learned how to not just internalize emotions and not express them, but I had actually learned how to dissolve emotions internally and not have them and just grow cold. And so that's how a lot of people knew me. And and so when that happened, I remember I sat on, I just kind of like crumbled against the wall. And I just sat against the wall, and I was every negative emotion that I knew how to have, all at 100%. And so I was mad, and I was hurt, and I was furious, and I was confused. And I remember thinking back just on, the fact that we had come from nothing. Both of us, we came from nothing. I mean, poverty. I was born in a trailer park and then into a women's shelter, and then stayed in an 1,100 square foot home until I was 17 years old. Then I'd been extremely successful, made a lot of money. I remember, we didn't go into this. It's not necessarily relevant, but, the money that Chris and I were making back in 2007, 2008, my largest 1 week paycheck was $26,000 coming back from Fort Wayne, Indiana. I was coming through Joplin, Missouri. I'd been up there in that market for a couple weeks, and I had earned 27 or 26K in a week. We were making no less than $4,000 a week.
And we were 18 years old.
18, 19 years old. We have access to any large home in the country that we have a market, which is places like Florida and California, New York. I mean, it's just, it was insanity. And so then we had this extreme monetary, say it that way, monetary success. And we were both very influential within that group of individuals. And so we were people who were looked at as influencers in that culture. We were both, you know, heavy recruiters. And so then we went from this like nothing to what we perceived as success. And I remember just sitting in that apartment, like I've seen both sides,
and still empty.
I've done the best I know how to do,
and still empty.
And this is where I'm at. And literally, I didn't have a way of relating this prayer, is what it was. I didn't have a way. I didn't have a way of connecting this. I just said, God, if you're real, show up, because I'm done. And I tell people all the time, you know, again, I tell this story. I've had thousands of students over the years. I've worked with like a bajillion different people. And sometimes they'll ask me, you know, this story or my testimony. And I tell people, you know, if some, you know, Krishna yogi guy would have showed up, I'd have been in India right now. You know, if Mormons would have came knocking on the door, brother, you know, Elder Walker would be chilling in Utah right now. If any other God was alive to hear that prayer, I would have fell in, because I didn't say Jesus. I didn't put a title. I just said God. I understood that the word God is not relational yet. It's until there's a name that's attached to it. It's just a title. And it wasn't any of those things. It wasn't any of those.
One who has ears to hear. Thank you and responded.
It wasn't any of those things. It was It was Jesus, and it was Jesus in the most practical way. Because I had the phone call with Chris, and he didn't know that I said, God, I give up, show up, because I'm done. He didn't know that. No. And then, you know, literally less than a day later, I'm on the phone with him, and he's telling me, hey, man, my life's like way different. I gave my life to Jesus. And I'm just starting to like, okay.
He said, I don't know what that means. I just need a friend.
Yeah, I don't care if you give your life to a caterpillar. I just need you to be here so that I don't go crazy. And so anyway, that's kind of that part. And then, and then you move in.
Well, I actually, later, like a week later. I had conditions to my move in, if you remember
them.
It was that we would read the word together, and whatever questions you had, I would do my best to answer. And if I didn't have them, I would go and find them. Like
now, what you guys need to understand about me is that's a dangerous proposition.
Dude, that worked me. But I loved it.
Opening up the opportunity for questions. I'm a very curious person, and I can be pretty tactful. Chris knew all my tactics though, and so I couldn't beat him up. But and it wasn't about that. It really wasn't that. But I get pretty curious, and then I get pretty done pretty quickly whenever people they're not about their business, you know. So anyway, that was a very precarious position that he put himself in, but it worked out well.
It worked out great because, I mean, I remember moving in and we would read the word and you would have questions on every sentence. And some answers I did have that were, I felt like really I would still stand by them today. And then some that were just way beyond, you know, probably even human understanding, like, there's just not an answer, Royce. Sorry, buddy. Yeah. You know, ask them when you meet them one day, you know. And so,
love those.
Yeah. So we move in together, which is just like a huge, I mean, all those pieces and how they work. And I'm a 1.5-minute drive. It's a 1.5-minute to work. I accept the role at Bluefish. It's a place where you can quite literally, as you're doing sales calls and you're calling and you're selling Bible curriculum and Bible study material I was in the youth pastor division. So calling youth pastors all over the country, asking them to check out this material. Really cool concept. You can have your Bible out and like literally read in between calls. And then everyone that you're working with, for the most part, we're Christians. So like you could constantly be having like conversations about the word and the Lord. And then there was even worship on Friday. So it was like the best place for me to transition to in my walk with the Lord. and then live a minute and a half away. And then starting to live with an old best friend of mine who, was agnostic at the time, but was starting to read the word. And I'm zealous. I'm just like, Lord, I know what you can do. So you're going to get this guy. You're going to get him. I can only do what he's agreed to, and that's just read the word together. I'm not going to really force anything else on this guy, but let's just see what happens. And so tell him a little bit about how you started recognizing everyone in your life.
Yep.
From the people you worked with, people coming into the store,
Yeah. So at the time, I was a manager and assistant manager for the Buckle I had worked in multiple malls. I worked in the North Richland Hills Mall. I'd worked in Joplin. I'd worked there in Plano as well. And so that's what I was doing. And it was real fun. I had a blast doing it, but not a really great environment. I put clothes on, middle-aged and teenage women. And that was 100% my clientele. I was good at it. I made a lot of money doing it and had a lot of fun, but not a great environment for, a young guy. But, I had been in a lot of environments in my life, and I'd always had these fake Christian people in my life. And I had never had anyone who was really, about following the Lord out of a relationship of love with him, outside of, and I will give credit here to my sister. So my half sister, she's older than I am. We didn't grow up together. We were the same father. And she was kind of like, Chris's grandma. She'd been praying for me. Everyone was praying for me, but no one was praying with me. And so that became very powerful later. But anyway, so I'm working and I prayed this prayer. Now Chris is living with me. I don't know if you remember the time, but Kevo would come over sometimes, and Kevo was the guy that worked with us. His dad was a pastor, and he would come do Bible study at my apartment. And my apartment quickly became the Bible study place. I mean, I always had people over. We were always doing something. I'm a big to this day. I'm real big with community and just we have an open door policy at our house with our students and to a degree. But anyway, I mean, if there's no one that comes over when we're, just home by ourselves or whatever, but if me and my wife are home, we both, work for the same church and, we're always together. And so if the door's cracked at my house, you can come in. That's the point. But I've always been like that and always had a bunch of people around. And I just started to recognize that, man, every area of my life, work, at home, in my social life, there was at least one significantly just devotional's not the right word. It's just there was a person who was intimately connected with Jesus. And I just started to put that moment and that piece together. And I just, I said, okay, well, God, I'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get there. We're not quite there yet. I'm just kind of putting this stuff together in my head. And I'm like, okay, God, you're obviously real. So I got to get to know who you are. So right about that time, Chris, we're doing Bible study. I can't remember if there was anybody else there. Now I want to say I feel like there was Sazen and Kevo were there, but I can't remember exactly. You might, I don't know.
Yeah, okay, Sazen.
Sazen was there.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think came a couple times. Kevin and then me and you consistently. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're doing that, and I remember I'm just I'm walking near the stairs of my apartment, and I haven't ever said anything different about how I believe. I'm not in a place where I believe anything different, honestly. And that didn't happen until I'm in that space, and Chris just looks at me and he just said, "Hey, he said, dude, I got a few questions that I want to ask you. You ask me all these questions all the time." I'm like, "All right, shoot." And he said, do you believe that Jesus was like a person? Like, do you believe like historically that Jesus was a person? And I was like, dude, I mean, BC and AD are based on this man's life. There's no more documented individual, even outside of the Bible. There's significant documentation of him. It would be foolish. And I mean, this is as an agnostic person answering this question. It'd be absolutely foolish to not believe in the first century man who shook up the world in Jerusalem, who went by the name of
still talk about him today, like
Yeshua, or that we call Jesus in the 20th century, 21st century, whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, cool. Like, do you believe that he died on a cross? And I was like, again, man, like the crucifixion of Jesus, this was a huge event. I mean, the literal earth. There's scientific record of the earthquake and the nightfall, that came as a byproduct of Jesus's death, or during this time. And so, yes, like I believe that Jesus died on a cross. And then he just said, remember, Chris, you asked me, you said, and this was like the dagger to the heart. And you go, do you believe that he did that for you? And I remember just like, like I didn't, none of us understand the implication or of the consequences of answering that question accurately in the moment. But as much as I could, I understood the moment that I was in. And I understood the question that was being asked, because it wasn't a question of simply, do I believe in that the way that I believe in the wind? This is consequential, that changes the trajectory of your eternity.
Yeah.
And I just said, yeah, I do believe that he did that for me. And it was a real, once sobering. I'm in, yeah, well, it was extremely sobering, but it was also like, okay, now we've got a journey to go on. And once I'm into something, my wife will tell you this: if I sink my teeth into something, good luck. I got zero gears, man. It's either 0 or 100 miles an hour. That's all I got. So yeah, that was kind of the big.
I was going to say, you'll know that both Royce and I are wired that way. My previous boss, probably my current boss, would even say, I will chew through brick walls to get where I'm going. Like the persistence and motivation, desire to, like, if I have a goal or something that I've sunk my teeth into, it's relentless to get to that place. And, over the years, we'll talk about kind of what the Lord does to people like us, and teaches us a lot of lessons, because in not every situation does he call you to do that pursuit, even though you might be wired that way. So, but that kind of gets us off a little bit of a topic. Don't want to go down too many rabbit holes, but yeah, I love those three questions. I will give credit to where it's due. The Case for Christ is what I was reading at the time. And I remember questions along those lines being in there, and knowing that he came from, I think his name is Lee Strobel, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I've read it, but that, what was that, 14 years ago? And so, but he has the evidence, he kind of went on that mission to disprove, and ended up becoming a born again believer in the mission of trying to disprove. And I remember some questions being along that, and I'm going, oh man, Lord, I feel like these might be great questions to bring to Royce and to the group, just to really, it makes you like reflect in your heart if you actually believe the evidence, but then also personally. And so, yeah, those three questions, just even hearing it just made me get a little choked up. It's legit. It's the real deal,
a big
man.
Moment, and I've led people,
it's great. I love it.
I've been leading communities now for, not exactly essentially since then, but especially we moved up to Kansas 13 years ago, and I got involved with the church. You guys will hear, a lot more about that as we go. After, Chris kind of tells about his journey. the Carolinas. But in leading those groups, one thing that I'm quick to just remind people of was that Jesus is naturally supernatural and supernaturally natural, and we're called to be the same. And yes, it was a cataclysmic shift of eternity into time, where in these two situations, there was something that had never been before, this transformed, revived spirit that became a thing, and not just changed our lives, not just changed our family's life. I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of people that we have seen their lives change, and that their lives have been changed in significant ways.
I mean, our
And
families would
that
be
happened
altered
because in my case, there was a group of people who were willing to be about their business and really love Jesus.
Yeah, the Father's
and
business.
in that space, really be there for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's all about the Father's business, and, revealing to other people the love of the Father.
Hold on. Sorry, I had a little mishap happen there. But
it's all good. So, all right, we are at the place where essentially those three questions are asked. You are starting to just radically get touched on by the Lord internally because of the people he's surrounding you with in your life. On my side, I'm like hot and heavy pursuit to the Lord. I'm just burning night and day. I'm having dreams, encounters, prayer. Just life is awesome. I want a wife at this point who I'm like, Lord, send me a wife that is on fire for you. That is, I want that. And so still working at Bluefish. And then Royce and I, go and get another apartment together. I'm not going to do the story of Tori and I and how we met.
Oh,
that will be
later. Okay,
yeah,
that's fine. That's fair.
I did meet my wife at Bluefish, so I will say that.
And I will say this too, for what it's worth, not to shade Chris at all, but it didn't immediately go super smooth. So don't expect that just when everything's like fresh, or when you're in that, but you can absolutely be on fire, and you can miss God on things 100%. He gives us grace.
My gosh.
Right? We misstep, and he guides the path. You know what I mean? So I don't want anybody to get the impression that it's just like boom, boom, where it's just like this thing happened and then this thing happened. There's definitely human reality in the mix and in the middle that I don't want to.
It's so messy. It's so messy.
100% messy.
But when anyway, I say I'm in a good place, it's my focal point daily was him in the mess. There's still the mess of humanity in the day-to-day, but as a new creation, you're learning how to walk again and speak again and listen and learn, and all these aspects of being a new creation in Christ. We were essentially starting to do that together as two new believers. Is it recommended? I don't know. I mean, I probably would say it's always wise to have maturity, wisdom with a new believer, always. So I always had my grandparents to lean on, always called them, reflected, got their counsel, got their prayer. But we were also young adults at this time that weren't living in the parents' house, didn't have that structure in place. So,
and didn't have much structure in life before that anyway, first of all. But then second of all, one thing that I think that this part is important. I won't go fully into this story, but I'm at the Buckle one day working, and there's this girl. She comes in, and I thought she was cute. She was with her little brother, and I told her, hey, if you're not doing anything later, come back. And she did.
Oh yeah,
And
this is important actually.
yeah, it is, because it's how we got to church. But
No,
that church,
so
the right church.
up until that point, I didn't know any churches in the area. Like Royce, like I didn't grow up going consistently to any church. My parents would take us before my parents got divorced. We were occasional churchgoers, but at 12, 13, it just like completely, there was no occasion. It was, if I went to youth group, it was to like go and try to like pick up a girl or something. I don't know. There was never like any names of churches that I knew or anything, especially because I lived, in Fort Worth most of my life and then moved over to the Richardson Plano area. So the only church that I knew, because I watched it on TV one time, was Fellowship Church with Ed Young. And
They had a campus.
They had a campus that was 10 minutes away. And I was like, Royce, like, I got to go somewhere. I need to be around other people who love the Lord. I need to be in corporate worship, because that's all that really mattered to me. Nothing else mattered.
I had a really significant struggle with that, and maybe we'll get into this when we talk about
you did, and I did too
later. But I mean, here was my thing with it. It wasn't anything as far as like, standards. I just look. This was literally how I told the Lord. I said, "Listen, I have a dysfunctional family. Yeah. I don't need another one. Like, we're good. You and me, we're good." And I remember the way that landed back on me was, if you know better, go be better. And then I spent the next 15 years learning how I didn't know better, and then sometimes saying, "Hey, pause, fam. Pause, church." And I've been an executive leader in church for a long time.
Yeah.
I learned that I didn't know better in a lot of the ways, a lot of the things, but there's a few things that, I've been able to say, "Hey, can we like maybe think about this part?" But anyway, it was in that season. It was actually in the middle of that. We had been there a couple times, but nobody knew what to do with us, because there's these two young guys. Chris is good looking. I wasn't bald, so I had hair. Some people would think
you're handsome, man.
My wife did. I like being bald, so it's dope, but I had hair. I like that better. But anyway, like, we got two young dudes. They're coming in. Everybody's looking at us sideways. I mean, because I didn't know this. We didn't know this about church culture. We didn't know that every girl there was looking for some dude to like ring up.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't know that. We were going in, and literally, we just had blinders on for Jesus, and that was so like catastrophic to these people that we would encounter. And because they thought that we had these other agendas, or that we're playing this social game, and we're not playing a game at all.
Like, where do we worship? We worship? Yeah.
So anyway, we kind of dabble into that. I won't go into the details on that because it gets kind of dangerous. But this chick ends up at the bell call. I said, "Come back, without your brother," and she does. And then she comes, back to the apartment, and she starts telling me details about her life, and she loves Jesus and all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, cool, like that's dope, like. And I remember, like, I won't go into some of the details that were actually significant at the moment, but I was just like, cool, like, where do you go to church at? And to her, taking someone to church was akin to breaking up with them, because she went to an extremely Pentecostal church. And it was weird to anyone who walked in, unless that was what you were about. Now, we didn't have a background in church, but we both love places and people and things that are like legit and in it. And I'm not saying, I don't know enough to know all the ins and outs, although we did get extremely close with these people, and I'm still close with a lot of them. Like, I didn't know the ins and outs of whatever it was that we were walking into. I just knew that one night on a Wednesday night, we got invited to
you went before
worship service.
You went without me the first time.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was describing. Because I went back and I was like, "Hey, dude, you got to check this out. Like, we're going here now. Like, this is where we're going to church."
We're always not content with fellowship, to be honest. I mean, we just were we're always trying to figure out like, how do we find another church? You know, like it's super weird walking into a church like two random dudes. Like it's not easy to find a church. Just FYI.
But I went to this Wednesday night, and immediately I remember Jeremy, Josh, Jared, Patty, Cameron. Jeremy walked up to me. What's up? Yeah. Jeremy. Keep going. Jeremy walked up to me. You know, these guys are around me. I'm new, and it was still to this day my favorite first line. Walking into a church, my favorite first line is Jeremy said, "Hey, my name's Jeremy. Can I pray with you?"
I know.
And I was like,
I know.
Yeah, you can. And dude, these guys got around me. I'm still, I still deeply love and am somewhat connected to all these guys. And but the first people that I ever knew prayed for me because they prayed with me. I still know all their names. I know their families. I pray for them consistently.
Well, these dudes didn't even know you.
No, and they didn't know me. And that's the thing. Like I'm so, like, you have to understand. I think so many people, especially when it comes to church things, they're worried about being churchy. Dude, you're in a church. Be churchy. Don't be weird. Don't be religious. Don't be dumb. Don't be socially awkward. Those aren't the same things. But they were none of those things. They were just about their business. They were about what they were about. And that drew in people, me and Chris, that were, we were
young adults.
Well, yeah, but the point I was trying to make was that we have been fruitful, not in just going to church and not in, we're not insecure. Like we got to get everybody to pray the prayer because we think that God will love us more if he does. It's none of that. It's this genuine fruit of the gospel that came because a group of people was willing to say, hey, we're about our business. My name's, Jeremy's, he's a firecracker still, dude. He's great. But, hey, my name's Jeremy. Can I pray with you? And then boom, it just immediately clicks in. We get plugged in there. God reconciled my relationship with Jenny.
You're jumping. No, slow down.
Hold on.
You come back.
It's all coming.
And you're like, dude, I found our church. And I'm like, tell me about it. And you told me, what Jeremy and the guys did. And just like the first 30 seconds you're there, these guys are like circled around you, laying hands on you, praying. And then you're just like wrecked. And then worship wrecked you. I remember you getting wrecked at worship, like for the first time in your life, just having an encounter with the Lord in his presence.
It was the first time that a corporate worship setting carried his presence in a palatable way.
Yeah.
So, that'll always wreck you.
Then I remember attending with you the following week because they would do young adults nights and then we would go Sundays. So we were like there twice a week. But then as we got like more plugged in, there was, outings and, we were just building friendships at that point. And, great church. Love the church. One of the best memories just because this is when I met, Tori, all of our friends from the name of the church, River of Glory, just over in Plano. I don't even know if it's still in existence, but
it's
just
not. No, I mean, Pastor Randy Speed. Yeah, Pastor Randy Speed's Speed is still in the area.
Yeah.
And great man, great man. It's just that place was so special, in so many different ways. I mean, like even to the point of, Pastor Randy's he's in the Martial Arts Hall of Fame. There were two scrolls of Isaiah. Huh? No, you would never know that. You would never know that he was a Green Beret and that he could murder you by looking at you either. He was such a playful dude, but he was very vicious. He could kill you literally. But anyway, there were two scrolls of Isaiah that were read from when Israel was inaugurated as a sovereign nation, and Pastor Randy was the honorary keeper of one of those scrolls until he donated it to a museum in Texas. And so just a really special place. Just anecdotally,
Lord.
One of the things I actually had rules that I had totally this was like a really weird thing. I always read old stuff when I was a kid even. And I remember thinking man, if I ever become a Christian, number one, I think Lutherans are legit, and they probably got it right because Martin Luther knew what he was doing, breaking away from the Catholic Church. So I'd probably be Lutheran. And then I remember saying, like, but I wouldn't want anyone else to be my pastor other than somebody who knew Greek and Hebrew. And I completely forgot about that.
He did. I mean, he did.
Pastor Randy was PhD both in Greek and in Hebrew, and I did not
He
know.
knew
I
his
literally
stuff.
for the first 4 years of my life, my Christian life, I didn't know that people didn't ebb and flow out of those languages when they preached, because that's how Pastor Randy. There was a contemporary service, just a regular service. I'm sorry, more of like a traditional service at the 9 a.m. and then there was a 10:45 or 11. I can't remember, but the 11 might go to like 2.
Yeah,
And
it could move, especially if worship.
like, yeah, exactly, dude. And but Pastor Randy would just teach, man, and he would just go in and I, it's funny because when I moved up here to Kansas, I didn't know people didn't do that, and that's kind of how I,
It was
started
like your upbringing.
to do. Yeah, that's how I was doing things, and they were like, "Why are you teaching Greek to kids?" And I'm like, "Why aren't you?"
Yeah.
Like, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about 8-year-olds. I'm talking about 14-year-olds. They can read the Bible. Like, what they need to know what these words mean. They're important words. They're the word of God. But anyway,
memory. I remember shortly after getting, involved and really, I mean, the messiness of like us trying to do this thing started getting cleaner and cleaner just because of like community, and like the people we were hanging out with were also on fire for the Lord, and we all just started like moving in the same direction with a group of people. It wasn't just me and you navigating the road by ourselves, but other young adults. And then you have pastors and leaders and this little church that really, I felt like, was pivotal for both of us. But fun memory. I remember coming home one day and your own Bible came in.
Mm-hmm.
And it was,
I read the words off of that Bible. Like the words went away from my finger going over them.
Jenny sent it.
Yeah.
Because she started hearing testimony of what was happening in our lives, and your life specifically, and Jenny sent that Bible to you. Well,
I'll tell you how that, all came about, because nobody knew what to do with me. It was like, it was very much a Saul of Tarsus kind of situation where they're like, I was a really radical dude, really rough guy, had a really sketchy background. I remember when I actually got saved, I took all of my drug contacts in my phone. And I sent everybody a text and just said, "Hey, I'm following Jesus. If you want to come with me, you're invited. If not, I'll catch you on the other side." And that was my cutoff moment with everybody. And if they, some people were super excited about that. Some people were not excited. They were kind of mad. And it was just like, okay, but this is what we're doing. So, but the way that came about was, I had gone through a really significantly difficult season in regards to my relationship with Jenny. In my life, I envisioned my life going very differently. And so when she got pregnant, I felt really trapped, and I was super bitter. I didn't know how to express all that, though, or even really say what was going on. I just saw my life going differently than it was going. And she got pregnant, and I went crazy. Like, legitimately, I just went crazy. I had all these people, all these opportunities, and I never went home. I was always gone out till 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes not even showing up. And I cheated on her with this one girl multiple times, and I had never said that. I had never talked about that with her, and it was a big reason why. I mean, I was dumb, and my wife is like an FBI agent. If she wants to figure something out, she'll figure it out. So she knew, but I never would talk about it. I would never address it or how much I had wronged her until, I'm in the Word. God's doing a ton of work in me. And so one day I remember I pulled over at the parking lot of the 24-Hour Fitness in Plano. And I just called her. Yeah, we did. I just called her and I just said, "Hey, I need to just lay this out. And I don't need you to forgive me. I'm not looking for anything here. I just know that I wronged you. I sinned against you. And this is what happened." And I just told her. And dude, you got to understand, like, that was not a thing. Like that was at this point, everyone was like, well, is Jesus, or is Royce just finding Jesus to, I don't know, kind of patch something up or do the genie trick, like, hey, God, come fix my thing. And that was the moment for Jenny that she knew, like, this isn't a game to him.
Yeah,
this
something's
is different.
changing.
This is different. So then she sent me that Bible, and that
I remember being so happy when I saw that. I was like, it's happening. Thank you, God.
That changed everything, Bubba. That was the beginning. That's the story. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot of moving pieces as it pertains to, the next apartment and the season.
Yeah. I mean, the goal was to kind of share how we connected, how God brought us together, have best man in my wedding, along with some other amazing men too.
Yes.
So, but 15 plus years of, pursuing the Lord, and now we are finally coming back together, and we've always dreamed of like doing ministry together. Just again, like burning hot together. So like this podcast is really going to be us coming together and talking about major issues within the church. Some of those issues, and it's not always like issue related or negative bent. Don't, when I say issue, it's not a negative thing. It's just something that needs addressing, to be talked about, to be dealt with. And, who are we to do this stuff? Well, we're guys that love the Lord. And so we're kingdom citizens. Are we qualified? I'm sure plenty of people could unqualify us in a second. But who really is qualified? Like, let's be real. So we're qualified as sons and disqualified in every other way. So I'll be the first to say it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's important too, because I don't have any space in my life for people who are just cynical. I've been in the church, on the ground from every different angle and level for, 15 years, not from the standpoint of cheerleading necessarily all the time, but oftentimes, especially initially from this place of like, this is busted. And I learned real quick that cynical view it's not helpful necessarily, but the least helpful thing is people who are just loud and disconnected. So we're not disconnected either. We're not people who are just talking about potential issues. I mean, these are things that, you might not hear on a Sunday because the preacher doesn't have time to talk about that. But also not coming with an angle, but just saying, hey, let's talk about this. Let's talk about it. Let's lay it out. And here's the deal. I work with families and have worked with families for a decade plus.
Right.
And these are things that I talk about on a day-to-day basis that people come to me and they say, Pastor Royce, we're so glad that someone's willing to say these things and have words for this and help us understand. And that's my piece of it. But we're not coming at this from, these are just issues. It's hey, what do you want to dive into that you feel like maybe isn't able to be talked about in a pulpit or on a Sunday morning experience? But the church needs to talk about it because we're here to talk about it.
Yeah, there is an agenda. The agenda is that the body of Christ will burn hot for Jesus, that we won't be lukewarm, we won't be cold, but we'll burn. And, to burn, you have to like actually stir up. If you've ever lit a fire, you have to stir it up. You have to move the pieces. You have to allow oxygen to breathe on it. And so like to speak on the matter and subjects that aren't really being addressed, that maybe are stagnant in the church or haven't been dealt with in a long time or being spoken about because of shameful acts or embarrassment, or maybe it's just not getting its attention. The scripture that we really are building this thing off of is Leviticus 6:12, and I'm just going to read it real quick. But the fire on the altar shall be kept burning; it shall not go out. It's not allowed to go out. The priest, not the high priest. Jesus is the high priest. We're just the priest, and the nation of priests, right? And so we will keep this wood moving, stirring it up, and that the fire will continue to burn in the body of Christ, in our own homes. It all starts in the home. All starts in this home, and in our families. And so we're excited to really kick this thing off. This is episode 1. Episode 2, get ready because my wife and I are going to be on here. Royce is going to interview us on the 3-year journey of a group that we were a part of. And so everyone tune in because that is going to be very, there's a lot of weight to that journey and to that 3 years. So excited to share that.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. Love you guys.
Anything to close out, bud?
No, man. Just excited. It's going to be fun. Buckle up.
All right. Well, love you, bud. Appreciate you hopping on.
Too.
Excited to do this thing. Peace. See you guys.
All right, cool. My computer's going to die.